review of preference assessments and the different types, and it was created by Bethany Dearden, Tamara Hartfield, and Danny Wayne. What is a preference assessment? A preference assessment refers to the attempt to determine the client preferences for a certain stimuli based on indirect assessment and direct assessment. The purpose of a preference assessment is oftentimes it is hard to determine what is considered to be a preferred item for some individuals, especially those with autism spectrum disorders or other developmental disabilities. Preference assessments evaluate the value of a variety of different items to determine what a person likes. Items that are identified are considered highly preferable items for that individual and can be used as a reinforcer to help increase desirable behavior. There are three types of preference assessments: interview, direct observation, and systematic assessment. Interviews are quick and easy and is a way to find out an individual's interest. They can interview a parent, friends, teachers, or the individual themselves if they're able to communicate. It involves open-ended questions such as what are his or her favorite activities. It also involves clarifying what comparison questions such as what does he or she like better, coloring or playing outside. The info can be gathered also using a survey, which acts as the respondent about the possible reinforcers and can include a ranking system to determine which reinforcers are the most potent. Examples of this is reinforcement assessments for individuals with severe disabilities, also known as RAISed. Interviews are easy to conduct and relatively time efficient, but however, information may not be accurate or complete. Relying on recounting information from past experiences is less reliable than witnessing the behavior as it is happening. The second type is direct observation. The individual is given free access to multiple items that he or she is expected to like, and the researcher records how long the individual engages with each item. The longer the individual spends with the item, the stronger the preference. The items can be ranked based on this information. The data should be collected over several days to promote accuracy and determine which item is truly the most preferred. It can be done in the individual's natural environment, such as the home or the school, and is usually more accurate than interviews. However, it also requires more time and effort than the interviews. Thirdly, we have systematic assessment, and it involves methodically presenting items to an individual in a controlled setting to determine preference. There are different kinds of systematic preference assessments, and they come in three formats: single item or successful choice, paired or forced choice, and multiple choices. Single items or successful choice are fast and simple. The items are presented individual, and you record data on how long the individual engages with each presented item. The paired or forced choice, all items are presented in pairs, and each item must be presented with all the other items in some type of random order. So if we have three items, item A, item B, item C, they must all be paired with one another. So item A with item B with item C, and then item C with item A. Individuals are asked to choose one in each round, and the item that is chosen most frequently is considered to be the strongest reinforcer. The paired or forced choice is more accurate than the single choice item, and it requires more time than the single choice items as well. The multiple choice systematic preference assessment is an extension of the paired choice methods. However, you need three or more items to choose from rather than just two as in the paired choice method. There's two variations of this, and that's with replacement and without replacement. With replacement is when an item is chosen, all other options are replaced in the next round. An example of this would be if an individual was offered a book, a car, and a stuffed animal. The individual chooses the car. So in the next round, the individual is offered the car. However, the book and the stuffed animal are replaced with different tangible items. Without replacement is when the item is chosen, it is removed from the next round, and only the remaining choices are presented. So for example, if the individual is again offered a book, a car, and a stuffed animal, the individual chooses the car, and the next round, the individual will be offered only the book and the stuffed animal. It is the most accurate method and requires the most effort in the sense that you will be having to remove items away from the individual. So it just might require more response effort on the individual who's conducting the preference assessment. So how to conduct a preference assessment. Before you begin, you would need to set up a data sheet and prepare the material. So whatever items that you are choosing as your reinforcers, and then set up a chair and a table for the student. And prior to beginning the assessment, you should seat the student at the table and allow them to sample each stimulus. For a toy, show the student how it works, and then place the stimulus on the table. And if the student approaches the stimulus, allow them 5 to 10 seconds to access it, or a small bite if it's an edible, and then repeat the procedure for the next stimulus. If the student does not approach the stimulus after 5 seconds, the therapist will prompt the student to sample the stimulus for 5 seconds, and after sampling the item or consuming the edible, present the stimulus again for 5 seconds. If the student approaches, allow 5 to 10 seconds, and if they do not approach, move on to the next stimulus. How to conduct it. 6 items for this. We will be focused on the multiple stimulus without replacement for this item right here. And this is because this will be the same as the ABA guideline in the school-wide implementation process. So 6 items will be included in each assessment, and you should assess edibles or tangibles in one assessment, but not both. So you would collect all the items that are going to be assessed and list them on the data sheet, which will be shown later. The client should be seated in a chair position in front of a table, and the items may be placed on a large tray so that they can be removed from the table in between presentations, but that is an option. Sequence the items randomly in a straight line, so on the tray about 5 inches apart, and instruct the client to pick one. Immediately after the selection, remove the remainder of the items to prevent multiple selections. Record the selected item on the data sheet by circling it. And after the client has consumed the edible or had the tangible for 30 seconds, move on to the next trial. You will need to ask for the item back if it is a tangible. After one item is selected, it is not replaced. For example, after the first presentation of 6 items, only 5 items will be presented next. If the student makes contact with more than one stimulus, give them the one that they touch first. Prior to the next presentation, rotate the remaining items on the tray by taking the item on the left and moving it to the right end, then shifting the other items so they are again equally spaced. Present the remaining items and repeat the procedure described above. Continue until all the items are selected or until the client does not make a selection within 30 seconds when they are told to pick one. In the latter case, end the section and record the remaining items as not selected. Here are some examples of items that can be used as a reinforcer. We have toys, cookies, candy, gummy bears. And here's an example of the data collection form. For data collection, record the stimulus selection selected during each trial. Target problem would be record the frequency of the problem as defined individually for each student while they have access to the stimulus selected. And if the problem behavior record, block access to the other stimuli. Input the number of trials each stimulus was selected and the number of trials each stimulus was included in the array, and calculate the percentage of trials each stimulus was selected by dividing the number of times the stimulus was included in the array by the number of times it was selected. Examine the stability of preferences to determine whether it is necessary to repeat the procedure more than 3 times. Calculate the average and average percentage of times each stimulus was selected across administrations, and sort the data in Excel so that the stimulus are sorted from higher to lower preferences. And this is the same method that could be used for multiple stimulus with replacement, but you would replace the item even after it is chosen. Examples of research is that Jones and his colleagues evaluate the facts of different access durations of preference assessment on a group of preschool-age children, and results show that items are always on the top of the list no matter how long or how short the access duration was. Compared with short access duration, long access duration can provide a more accurate preference ranking. Also, Rush and colleagues proved that a paired choice preference assessment is effective on a 13-month-old baby with some prenatal conditions. Rowan and colleagues evaluated the effects of a brief stimulus mini preference assessment on 10 individuals with developmental disabilities and compared brief stimulus with paired stimulus preference assessment by doing 2 experiments, and results show that brief stimulus is better than paired stimulus reference assessment in time efficiency. Sishan and colleagues conducted a peer stimulus preference assessment on 6 individuals with developmental disability. They classified preferred items into different categories, and their research suggested that in practical field, clinicians can rely on the identification of high preference stimulus category to infer the likely reinforcing efficacy on an untested stimulus from the same category. So if you had one category that 2 things fell into, we can assume that the second will be likely as reinforcing as the first if they fall within the same category. DeLone and colleagues compared 3 methods of presenting stimulus during reinforced preference assessment: a paired stimulus format, a multiple stimulus format in which selections were made with replacement, and the multiple stimulus format in which selections were made without replacement. The outcome of the study was that the multiple stimulus procedure without replacement may share the respective advantages of the other methods. As far as the school-wide implementation process, implementing in the school would be fairly easy. The teachers inside of the classrooms would be trained on the implementation process by a BCBA for an estimated of 3 hours, which will allow for peer modeling, practice for each implementer, and questions and discussions. And in this session, all implementators will be able to role play with one another on how to conduct a preference assessment and get positive feedback from the BCBA. The school administrators will also be invited to the session so that it can have school-wide support and backing. The teachers will then return to the classroom to conduct preference assessments on the children in their classrooms. Items will be gathered from the current classroom as well as other classrooms within the school. And also the parents will be notified of the preference assessments as well. And then identified reinforcers will be used for positive support interventions. Some healthy tips for conducting preference assessments and on-preference assessments in general. They are a good way to determine what items are reinforcing for individuals, both with and without developmental disabilities. Conducting a preference assessment is a proactive strategy of intervention, so be sure to follow the procedure correctly. Remember only to use one type of stimulus category at a time, tangibles or edibles, not both. And once the item is selected, move the rest of the items away. Don't replace the item once it has been chosen, and that refers to the multiple stimulus without replacement. And also with all preference assessments, though they do tell us what items are reinforcing, sometimes you may have to reassess the reinforcers and conduct another preference assessment to ensure that the identified reinforcers remain as such. One other thing that I would like to show with you guys is an example of what a preference assessment looks like.
This is a multiple stimulus without replacement preference assessment. I have some things here that you might like. There's graham crackers, pickles, cranberries, Girl Scout cookie, walnut, and cheese bits. All of my things are about the same size. Pick one. Pick one. Pick one. Pick one. Pick one. Pick one. Because there is no selection, I'll represent the child. Pick one. From this, I think you like Girl Scout cookies the best, but don't like walnuts or cheese crackers.